Good evening. My name is Kwame Norval, and I am your host for Kelly's Public Safety and Community Support Call for Progress. I am very happy to be here and happy to have you guys here. We're going to have some important conversations that absolutely need to be had for the good of the community. Kelly's running for District 6, and she's going to she's got some good ideas, and I'm excited to have the people that we have on tonight. And I am again Kwame Norval, social justice political activist. I work at a medical marijuana dispensary, and I am passionate about a lot of the things we'll be discussing tonight. So again, I am just ecstatic to be here and be your host, and thank you for joining us.
So I just want to make a quick note before we begin that all panelists have been invited to speak to share their knowledge and experiences with the community. Their appearance does not indicate any support or endorsement of Kelly Ransom's campaign, or candidacy. This is an information gathering effort for the community at large, and we thank everyone for their time and sharing their knowledge and experience with us. We say that at the beginning of every video. So I'm Kelly Ransom, and I'm running for Boston City Council District 6, which covers Jamaica Plain, West Roxbury, Roslindale, Back of the Hill and Mission Hill, and a little bit of Roxbury. I don't even know what number hall this is, but we've been doing halls for about 2 weeks now. We're rounding it out. We have our final one on Sunday for climate and environment. And tonight we are doing public safety and community support. So Kwame and I have worked together. So today I did the math, how long Kwame and I have been collaborating, and it's been 22 years, which was jarring to realize. But I'm so happy to have worked on this event with Kwame. The way the public halls have been working are we choose a policy topic area, and then we choose a more like focused topic. Sometimes we have multiple topics in one hall, or sometimes we have one topic in a hall. So tonight we will be having similar conversations. And I'm so excited to do this. The reason that I did these halls was to inform the community and let them hear multiple points of view on certain issues or multiple experiences in a certain field. I think it's really important for me as someone who's running for office and for my constituents or anyone really. This is going to go on YouTube, so anyone all over the world can watch this. And I just think it's really important to bring information to the community through video. I'm a former talk show host. I was a co-host on BNN. It's all about arts. And then last year, during the height of the pandemic through the summer, I ran a daily live stream on my this is like my personal stuff, totally not related to the campaign, called Lockdown Lunch. And I invited people on from all over America that I knew, just like my friends, and just made a sort of time capsule for the pandemic and information gathering for the community at large. And I found that to be really effective and important. And I didn't realize it was going to be like that. So I chose this talk show style format because A, I'm comfortable, and B, it's more casual that way. I think it makes people comfortable. So welcome. If you have any questions, you can always email me, kelly@votekellyransom.com, and we'll have I keep doing this down here on YouTube. We will have all of the information and resources shared tonight.
Thank you, Kelly. I'll first want to introduce our first guest who will be speaking tonight. With us, we have Boston Police Officer David Hernandez. Thank you, David, for taking some time out to come and join us for this.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm very excited to be here and be part of this conversation that's really important.
Thank you so much, David. So I need to preview this with David and I have met once in person. And that first time that I met him, I asked him to be on this panel and he said yes, like without really even knowing me. So I'm just so happy that you agreed to do this. 1 second. Kwame, if you don't mind stopping sharing your screen. Perfect. Awesome. I appreciate you. I did one of these by myself last night and I was like, this is not easy to do by myself. David, I'm so happy to have you again. And let's just get started. And I'm wondering, what was your pathway to becoming a Boston police officer?
All right, yeah. So starting off, becoming a Boston police officer was something I always wanted to do when I was a kid. It actually started as a passion when I was like 8 or 9 years old. I was involved in what was called it was a program for 8 or 9 year old in Jamaica Plain, and now I'm drawing a blank on what it was called. It was not the cadets. It was called the Explorers Program, excuse me. And I was, it was something that I was really excited about. And, they took you to different academies, like the Boston Police Academy. They took you on field trips all the time. And there was one specific police officer who was really involved in my life as a kid. He was my DARE officer. For those that know what DARE is, it doesn't really exist anymore. They
I
found
remember
that it wasn't
that.
really working. But he was my DARE officer. He was my Little League coach, and he ended up being like a really close family friend. And so that was like my first introduction into what I expected policing to be, and that kind of started a passion for me. But I think like any other kid, you're drawn to a bunch of different things. And so like I wanted to be an athlete at one point, I want to be a doctor, whatever, but as I got a little bit older, I saw what I consider like the more negative side of policing, and getting stopped and getting profiled. And at 15 years old, unfortunately, I saw my dad get choked by a police officer in the driveway of my home. And, it really impacted my family in a really negative way. For me, it was one of those things that, really stood with me for the rest of my life and continues to stay with me now, even as a police officer. And I was seeing it happen in communities of color, in my community. And although I can honestly say that it wasn't as prevalent as I thought it was now, like I think back to those moments, I think obviously it exists in the especially in communities of color. I can confidently say that it does exist. But now I know a little bit differently. But anyways, getting back to my story, that really drove me. And the reason it drove me is because when I walked out of my house and saw my dad being choked by a police officer, the police officer that was at the end of my driveway looked over at me and said, "Mind your business, go back in your house. This has nothing to do with you." And obviously for me, that was like, what do you, I got angry and I got frustrated. But as a kid, I listened to the police officer. It's almost like you're in shock. You're like, what's going on? I didn't know what to do. So I went back in my house, and like, my dad stopped, like they stopped doing that to my dad when I walked out. And my dad finally came into the house and he said to me, like he was so angry and frustrated and confused. And for me, that was like a really defining moment. Because I knew at that moment that I wanted to be a police officer, not because, I wanted, like, for me, it was because I knew that I couldn't allow that to happen to anyone else. And I knew that I wanted to live in a community that no matter where I went and what I did, I knew people felt safe. And I knew that I could provide that to them, and I could help my coworkers feel that same sense of empathy towards our communities, not just communities of color, all communities. So then I continued on to college. I studied criminal justice, and continued my work in the community, because from a young age, I was always really involved in the community because of my parents. They worked with the homeless. They worked with kids. I went through the High Square Task Force in Jamaica Plain, which really kind of opened doors for me in understanding how community works and being a community organizer. So for me, that kind of all those different aspects of my life really drove me to be a police officer and create change in my community.
Thank you for sharing that story. I'm sorry that you experienced that, but do like that it inspired you, like, in a way to continue on the path of helping people. So thank you for that.
Yeah, no.
I'm wondering, what does a typical day look like for you right now?
So I actually recently got transferred to a specialized unit. It's called the Dignitary Protection Unit. So we work with different officials throughout the city. I'm particularly specifically assigned to the mayor's office. So I work with her right now, and it's very busy. You know, wherever the mayor goes, we go. We're constantly on the go, constantly going to community events, which for me is tough, right? Because I kind of have to play both roles. I know that I'm working and my focus is her, making sure that she's safe, but at the same time, I'm engaging and connecting with people. So I'm able to do both roles there, and it makes me really happy because I understand the importance of her role as being the first woman mayor and the first Black mayor. So I think for me, it's a very historic moment. So I feel very proud to be in the position that I'm in. To be able to have been selected to protect our mayor. So I'm very proud of that. But prior to getting into this role about a month and a half ago, I was a patrolman for almost 8 years. And a typical day would go from it was a number of different calls. Some days were low key. I was stationed in Brighton before I went over there, and a day might go from dealing with a what I would call a nuisance call, like someone's blocking my driveway, to in Brighton we have a lot of mental health issues. We have a lot of college students, a lot of early. So we're dealing with a lot of a tough part of the population that are dealing with a lot of mental health issues. And so as a police officer, you know, it's difficult at times to deal with those types of situations because we're not necessarily trained for that. But I think we do the best that we can, and we use Boston EMS a lot, which are trained for that. I think Boston has a good position in how they do things. So typically, if like a mental health call comes in, what will happen is they'll send out both Boston Police and Boston EMS. And now recently they've started a new clinician program. So they have clinicians coming in, psychologists and social workers that are working with the mental health people that we deal with. So I think that that's really important that we're starting this new program, and that seems to be working really well. So that was just in Brighton, but in general, like I've worked in Mattapan, I've worked in East Boston, and depending on where you are, the call volume is different, and then the types of calls that you get are also different. So you can, like I said, you can go anything from new nonsense call from like blocking a driveway to something like a shooting. So our days can really vary.
That sounds intense, and I just love hearing you talk about the first female Black mayor. Like,
Yeah.
so good. I'm so happy for that happening, and it's great that you're working with her. I want to ask one thing that, sorry, I wasn't on here, but I've heard a lot, pretend I know nothing. I've heard a lot about the BEST team. Could you tell me what that is?
Yeah, so the best team has been around for a couple of years now. It was more in I think 2 different areas of Boston. So if you're looking at policing, it's split up in different areas: A, B, C, D, and E. And so in each area, depending on where you're at, depending how big the area is, you either have 2 or 3 different districts of police officers. Like Area E is a very big area, so you have District E18, E5, and E13.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you have those 3 different areas, districts, excuse me. So, but the best team is assigned for mental health they're like mental health specialists. And so if you have a situation that is deemed safe, obviously is the number one thing, right? Where they can come in and they can do their work as social workers, as psychologists, and speak with the mental health patients to really get them the help that they need, right? Because as police officers, we can only be so much of a resource. And having them there with us is us keeping them safe and making sure that the whole scenario is safe while letting them do their job. and what their job looks like. It's deploying different tactics like verbal tactics, trying to calm this, de-escalate the situation as best as possible. That's what they're trained to do, and obviously we're trained to do that as well as police officers, but they have more of the knowledge and experience in that field.
Thank you for explaining that. Just
Yeah, no problem.
in case no one knew that that existed in Boston.
Right.
So how do you see policing evolving in Boston or everywhere, especially in communities of color?
Yeah, I think it's a twofold thing, right? Like I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that police officers need to do their part in helping build this bridge again with the community. I will say that Boston has always done a pretty good job of community policing, but it doesn't mean that things haven't changed because of what's been happening around the country. Uh, Although in Boston we're not seeing the same devastating effects of police brutality, right? Like it's not happening as significantly, like the killing isn't happening as significantly as it's happening in other parts of the country, but we are feeling the effects here. And so because of that, I think it's important to continue to build relationships with the community in different ways. And so I think that as we talk about evolving, it's important to talk about the fact that we need to work more closely with communities of color. We need to build relationships, and how we do that is by really, like, in my opinion, going into schools and building relationships from a young age, right? Because it's not just once a person reaches the age of adulthood that you want to start building these relationships. I think it starts at a really young age, and working with parents to help people understand the importance of policing, but in the right way, right? Like keeping your community safe, and us working together to talk about how we can be peacemakers in our community, not necessarily police officers, right? Like enforcing the law is one part of it, but I think it's really important that we change the narrative to become peacemakers in our community. That's ultimately what everybody wants, right? Like we want our police officers to keep the peace. And so how do we do that? We start from a young age, going into schools, building relationships, and really get to know our communities, right? Like I think we've gone far away from the old, I don't know what better way to put it than like the howdy doody days, right? Where you like are, you have your officer that used to walk the beat, and he used to get to know all the neighborhood stores, and he used to get to know all the neighborhood kids. And like in each district, you have the ability to do that. But I feel like obviously with cars and with technology, we've really taken a big step away from connecting as a society. And I think that coming back to that will really bring us closer together.
I think that's a very interesting take. So thank you for answering that question for me and everyone watching. So I have the next question is, how do you help connect folks to services? And if you want to talk about your other things that you do outside of your job,
Yeah.
this would be the spot.
Okay, yeah, no, for sure. So I think there's some things that we can do at like in the role of a police officer, right? Like figuring out what you have in your specific district, figuring out what you have in your specific area, I think is really important. Like, sorry, 1 second.
That's okay. Life happens.
Sorry about that. So yeah, in one aspect, I think it's important to do it like as a police officer. You have to think about it as what do you have, what resources do you have in your area, right? Because every district, every area has their own community-based organization, right? That are resources for kids, that are resources for adults. And I think it's important as police officers for us to know exactly what's in our area. So when we go to a call, I think we're as a first responder, we should be getting there and being like, okay, let's say it's a call for, like, sometimes we get calls for parents that are having trouble with their kids going to school, right? And they'll call 911 and say, my kid doesn't want to go to school. That's not necessarily a police function. However, us getting there and being a resource for them, I think is really important. Us getting there and saying like, hey, I see that you're having trouble with your child. What about, have you thought about putting them in an after school program where they can see other kids that maybe you're working a lot and after school it's not really working for you, and maybe having kids with like-minded mentalities will help your child get on the right track, right? So I think that's one part of it, but the other part of it is being involved as a police officer and volunteering your time. I think that's really important for us. So like Kelly, like you were saying, I have an organization. I founded an organization like 4 years ago called Jago Boston, which is the Latino law enforcement group of Boston. And what we do is we're a resource for the community in itself. And what we are is an organization that started off primarily around Latinos and we wanted to bring our culture to policing as a way to connect with the community. But what we found very quickly is that we have to be inclusive of everybody, right? So although our name is the Latino Law Enforcement Group of Boston, or JAGO Boston, we're a very inclusive group, and we have white, Black, Latino, Asian, we have all different kinds of members that have joined. And we run different programs for the community. One program that we run is called the PAT, or Peer Academy Training Program. And what that is basically an introduction to what people are going to see in a police academy. And the reason we created that is because I think along this topic, a big part of how we change policing and how we grow and how we evolve is having a more diverse police department, right? And so we took it upon ourselves to create this program. And so far, we've done it for the last 3 years. Just to give you a little bit about the program, it's a program that runs for 8 weeks from 7 in the morning on Saturdays until 12 p.m. only on Saturdays. And we do physical fitness, just like you would see in any police academy. And then we have classes in the afternoon. And the classes can run from intro into policing to transitioning into policing, constitutional law, criminal law, all like the basics of what you're going to get in the police academy, but to kind of give you a head start once you get there. A lot of times what we were finding is that especially minorities, people of color, and women were going into these academies and they were dropping out very quickly. And the reason that we were finding that they were dropping out was because it was a big culture shock, right? And especially, I know in the Latino community and in the Black community, if you're not my parent and you're yelling at me, there's a problem. It's like you're taught to respect your elders, don't get me wrong, but if you're a grown man or a grown woman and you're getting yelled at by another adult, that always seems to be an issue, right? And so if you didn't grow up in that culture, or you didn't at least understand the culture going into it, it's tough to deal with. And so what we were finding is that a lot of Black and brown people were like dropping out really quick. And so what we do in our program is we introduce people into a little bit of that. We explain why it's done. And then we help mentor them. It's basically like a mentorship program that follows them all the way through. They get to an academy and then all the way as police officers. And the idea is that they will come back and help us and build, pay it forward. So far, we've been really, really successful. In our 3 years, we've had the majority be people of color and women in all of our programs. We have 100% success rate for anyone that has gone through our program and gotten into an academy. So we're very, very proud of that number. This year, going into the police academy, we have 12 students going into the next Boston Police Academy, which we're really excited about. And that makes up around like 11% of the class. So, we're getting more and more students every year. If it wasn't for the pandemic last year, we probably would have had close to 60 students. We had 80 people apply to our program last year. I'll say that also the Boston Police Department has been very accepting of it. And they've been like, we're constantly in talk with their diversity person, Michael Gaskins. He's really great, and he connects with us all the time. And we're doing our part to try to change and diversify police departments, not just in Boston, but across the state of Massachusetts. And we're hoping to expand even more. So that's a little bit about what I do and how I try to get connected in the community and be a resource for them. Our programs do a lot more. That's just one of our programs. We also have a PT meetup, which is just physical fitness for them. It's completely free. We've had even more people go through that, where it prepares them physically to go into a police academy. And then we do salsa classes for the community. We've done fundraisers for like hunger. Not hunger. It's called the Taste of the Caribbean. Excuse me, I was confusing it. I have another organization that's called Hunger Happens, and that's more for homelessness and hunger, but not on the topic of policing. But anyway, so that's a little bit about Jago Boston.
That sounds like a great organization and an important one. And your success rate is impressive for real. Like,
Yeah.
that's amazing for
No, it's, you know, I think the biggest thing for us is we're an organization is that works together. Right? We're not looking to take all the credit for everything. I think we understand the importance of working together in the community. So it's not just law enforcement officers that are a part of our organization. We also have lawyers, and we have bankers, and we have all different kinds of people that are, you know, social workers. We're up to like 200 members, and we have all different types of people that are involved in Jago Boss. And our board is around 18 people, and we have 4 civilians on our board. So it's a pretty good organization, and we're hoping to continue to grow and continue to do the work that we're doing, and not just get paid. It's all on a volunteer basis.
thank you for getting involved in that way. And I think it's important.
Yeah.
And they make the choice in the end, right? If they want to go to the academy or
Right.
not. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to say too, right? Like, so for some people, they might realize, hey, you know what, maybe this isn't for me. Maybe I realize after going through this that this isn't for me. But then that opens up another opportunity for another person to come in and take that seat that would have wanted it and may not have gotten it, because it is tough to get on to the Boston Police Department in general. It's very competitive, and you know, I think to your point, it's, oh, sorry. I think to your point, it's, you can have that too. So
Awesome. So I need to move along because of time.
yeah, no problem. I know I talk a lot.
No, I that's what I loved when I met you. I was like, you're perfect for a talk panel. Like, um, so where can we learn more about the work that you do? And I will make sure to include these resources down here on YouTube.
Yeah, so I'll say this. So if you're in Boston, I think it's important to acknowledge the fact that we, as a Boston Police Department, they do have the Bureau of Community Engagement, right? And they do a lot of work in the community, especially with kids. They have a program called We Belong that works with kids in the community, and I think that that's a great program that they have out of there. The president of the organization called MAMLIO, the Massachusetts for Minority Law Enforcement Officers, Dr. Jeffrey Lopes is the president of the organization, and he's one of the founders of We Belong, who brought it to the Boston Police Department. And, you know, along with the Boston Police Department, they really helped to grow. So I think that that's one area where you can start if you're in the city of Boston, is the Bureau of Community Engagement. For more on JAGO, you can go to latinolawenforcementgroup.org, or you can follow us at JAGO_Boston on Instagram, or you can find us on Facebook at JAGO Boston on Facebook as well. All those
Awesome.
resources are there. And, you know, if you're looking to just kind of ask more questions, you can always email jagoboston@gmail.com and, you know, say, hey, David, I had some questions of some follow-up, and I'll get back to you as well on that.
Thank you for offering that, and I'll make sure that I get these out. So we always end I always end every guest interaction with what drives you to do this work every day.
Yeah, I think just keeping people safe. Equity is what drives me every single day, right? Like making sure that everyone feels safe equally. I think it's like I told you, it goes back to my story of when I first experienced like my personal interaction with police brutality. It was something that, like, I can't imagine having someone have to go through that as a kid. I think for me, I look back at that moment and it drives me every single day. Like there's not one day I don't think about it. There's not one day I don't want to be at like a call to make sure that whoever it is feels safe. But I think what I've come to realize is that there's a lot of police officers that share a similar mentality. They may not share the same story, right? Like not every police officer was a victim of police brutality, but there's a lot of police officers that are empathetic to the struggle of people of color. There's a lot of police officers that see what's happening around the country and are just as upset as I am, and can be empathetic to that. So I think that what drives me every day is the change that I see within the police department, right? Like, I think I think a big part of what we're seeing is a generational thing. Like, you have a lot of older police officers. I'm going to speak specifically about here in Boston, right? I can't talk about the rest of the country, but what I can say is that here in Boston, I can confidently say that younger police officers are not going to make the same mistakes. There may be one or two along the way that are not perfect, and I got to leave room for error there. But I think the overwhelming majority has shown me in the time that I've been a police officer that things are changing. And if they don't believe in the change, then they're probably going to leave because we'll kick them out. I think there's enough police officers that are sick and tired of seeing the police brutality, that are sick and tired of seeing people killed. And I think we've reached that point where we're going to start standing up and just removing them. So I feel very confident about that. And I think a lot of it is generational. I think the way people used to police is way different than people police now. And, we're holding each other accountable. And I think that's the most important thing is what we want, accountability. So it drives me every day to continue to work on the change, to be part of the change, to make my community feel safe.
Thank you for that. I love knowing what drives people, because you have to be driven to do what you do every day. So I want to thank you so much for joining me tonight, and thank your team for letting you have the night off to be here or whatever happened. So I appreciate that. It's so good to see you, and I appreciate you and all the information that you shared and having this conversation for the community at large.
Yeah, no problem. Anytime. I know it's like there's a lot to fit into a small time frame.
Yeah.
So if you ever want me back on, let me know. Like, I hate to always have to keep it so short because, like, as you know, we had probably like an hour-long conversation, if not more, and we have to shorten it significantly. So I know that there's probably stuff that I missed, and like facts that I missed. So, if, like I said, to anyone that watches, if there's ever any questions, please feel free to ask. If you want to call me on something, again, I'm always open to conversation and understanding. I think that's really important. It's important for us as a community to build together. And so that's why I think that something like this is so important.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much. So we're gonna pause for a second. We were gonna have next one of my coworkers, Will Smart. He's a community support manager at Madison Park Development Corporation, but not necessarily why I invited him because I work with him. I invited him because he's a part of the neighborhood trauma team and violence and prevention program. But he had a family emergency, so we'll have the conversation another time. So thank you for now, and we'll be right back.